Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the WebBot report summary. Apologize for my stuffy sounding nose, but when I have information and stuff, I just want to get it out. For all my new subscribers of recent times, which I average about 23 or 25, sometimes much higher, sometimes a little bit lower. You may not have even heard of a WebBot. What the hell is a WebBot? I'm going to ask you to go search the internet. What is the WebBot report? How does it work? Whatever. Um, Again, as I mentioned, dates and times. Sometimes they may happen right as they were forecast to happen in advance, like a future forecast. Sometimes not. Um, Cliff has done some restructuring, if you will, of his WebBot, and he's mentioned to me a little while back that it appears to be a, a bit more accurate with its future predictions since the changes he made. And since the last part of 2015, like the last month, November, December, I remember, WebBot hit, another WebBot hit, another WebBot hit. I was doing several videos like that, so I can definitely see some of what he said happening. And even since we've gotten into this year, 2016, there's been a few more that I've done WebBot hit, that he's gotten right. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you the summary. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I had to leave a lot out. There was quite a bit for the USA Pop entity in this report, quite a bit in the markets entity. I had to erase a lot of stuff because I need to keep these summaries down to about 30 minutes. I will urge you, just in case, you may want to grab this baby. $15. Website is Cliff's website is halfpasthuman.com. Again, for $15, you have a report. You can go back and read it whenever you feel like it. You may see some things that happen. Oh, let me go see if that was in the report. Oh my God, yes, it was. He mentioned something, look out for this. There's a lot of stuff in here that he says, look out for this, and then this should happen. Look out for this, and that should happen. I left a lot of that out. Again, when I do these reports, I only want to try to cover what I feel is the most relevant stuff, but that may not be the same for you. And I always say that, and I apologize, but that's kind of like my little opening statement I always do when I do these reports. Um, this one looks like a doozy, if you will. So here we go. I'm going to start with the Terra entity. A lot of times I'll leave that out, which is simply Earth changes and stuff, because I want to focus on USA Pop, markets entity, and maybe some other stuff. But there's definitely some stuff going on in Mother Earth. It's obvious, and I need to include that this time around. So it is actually 11 o'clock p.m. my time, Eastern. I've got a half hour, so let's see what I can do. Terra entity. The data continues to grow in support of the super hot summer sets that have been accumulating new subsets for the sharp turn from rainstorms to dry spells and intense heat. Yet, as repeatedly mentioned here in the Alta reports, the global human experience is about to be heading into an ice age. And the last of the years of oscillations between heat and cold are now fading down to only a few still ahead of us. As may be expected, the data is quite sure that as the pivot or turn into more ice age phenomena, that the last heat spells will be the most intense experienced in documented human history. The data sets are describing a wilding year that will begin or has already begun and is being described as actually carrying on for several years. The wilding aspect set includes descriptors for out of season and out of place attributes for both weather and earth related events. Some of the details suggest that icebergs will be in odd places and in odd numbers. Further, that new glaciers will be reported in dozens of locations, yet blazing summer heat will create forest fires from hell across much of the northern hemisphere. One other thing I forgot to mention that I always mention, I have these put out in paragraphs, each of these. I'm bouncing around all over this report, usually from top to bottom, but I may skip a huge section and then go right on down. So even though I'm reading to you another section, you may not even know it. So it may not sound like it kind of flows with what I just said. It is what it is. Just take that into consideration. Other aspect / attribute sets accruing to the oceans subset or subsets show that giant waves, additional note, not tsunamis, just very big waves, will be invading the coasts, especially those beaches where the sand is stable enough to support a slope. The detail sets are indicating that videos from around the globe will be uploaded after capturing big waves as they washed sunbathers and beach walkers bank inland, or conversely, drug them out to sea in the backwash. These big waves are showing up as being very damaging to the global tourist industry in the summer beach season. In some of the detail sets, we see that cruise ships, Mediterranean ? Will be bashed into quays, which with such force that damaged hulls will force abandonment of the sailing schedule. The guests and crews are described as being flung overboard, as well as down hallways and stairs. So this is one of those things. Keep your eyes and ears out for, because this would make news. Oh, cruise ship had such and such, rescue at sea. It would be on the news. So if and when that happens, think back. Hey, man, I think that damn Webbot report said that. I don't have a time frame for this, other than, in the near future probably. Within the next paragraph, within the new forecast for 2016 arising from the Terra entity, we have the oceans heaving up precipitation subset, in which the previously forecast and now confirmed new types and intensities of ultraviolet light will be once again the precipitating factor, pun intended, for vast amounts of water rising from the oceans and heading inland. These sets are showing that the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans will be evaporating at rates that will be visible to those sailing on them, as daytime fogs will be seen to lift from mid-ocean. Another thing you'd think there will be videos and possibly news about, like, hey, this is a weird thing, this middle of the day fog in the middle of the ocean. It's not fog, it's precipitation, it's evaporation in a massive scale. Global pop entity, meaning the whole world, the whole planet, nowhere in specific, nowhere like, United States, whatever, the globe, everywhere. This applies to everybody is what it's saying. Following the emergence of the upheaval within the Yemen-Arabia war, which is Saudi Arabia, Yemen, the data shows that the Western officialdom, media, and Western trading / controlled markets also go into upheaval just as the wave of redemption starts hitting the hedge funds in an attempt by those cognoscenti terzo livello, third level functionaries, to run ahead of the crumbling geopolitical situation. The new growth in the global pop entity for the spreading, like a rash, political upheaval that will be traveling around the planet as the dollar wobble goes into extreme oscillation. Very large crosslinks over to the markets entity, where there are a plethora of terminating sets that include blackouts, shutdowns, sinking of major shipping, destruction of roadways, and other language and support positions to the financial impacts of the political upheaval. The language of collapse starts to appear in larger numbers as model spaces progress past June of this year. Then the rate of growth escalates at a rate that itself accelerates as model spaces move through the year. At the base of all the many layers of crosslinks from the upheaval language, we find repeated crosslinks over to the fiat currency's race to destruction and the social instability from hyperinflation. Global pop entity is filling with language for new conflicts and shifting populations, much of this within the European zone or on NATO borders. Note that the data is also indicating that NATO just falls apart in essence as their funding fails and needs change and alliances shift. This last as a cross-link over to population alteration via refugee migration. As a further subset of supporting values rise up in the subsets for systemic failure, the NATO related sets show that internal disputes about roles and responsibilities will lead to open verbal taunting and bad behavior. Other signs of a NATO sagging to its knees before fading away, will include paper debt at monstrous levels that will be discovered along with bribery and other corrupt practices, which will lead to fractionalization or splintering into self-protecting tribes/fiefdoms of the NATO upper echelon control structure. Europop. As has been previously forecast, the refugee crisis in Europe has taken a core peoples versus the invaders tone, which is exactly what the Webbot said would happen previously. That is true. The data sets are suggesting that this situation will continue to harden as the refugee crisis meets the monetary crisis from hell. As the euro degrades, the data sets are piling in on social upheaval. These sets include migrants versus police and migrants take over Rothschild properties. I mentioned that in the previous report. That migrants would actually, the people would say, oh, hey, migrants, go over here. That's your spot. And it happens to be Lord Rothschild's property. I can't wait. I hope that is a spot on forecast because I cannot wait to hear about that happening. So these sets include migrants versus police and migrants take over Rothschild properties and running street battles. Paris. No, he's got a Rothschild properties. I know he meant Rothschild properties. He's a misspelling. And running street battles. Paris, ? All of these and many more sets are going to the idea of a very tense and violent summer in the Eurozone as both the social structure and the monetary system degrade into failure. The data accretion patterns for Europop have added several new sets since our last processing. In some of these sets, we see that armed confrontations are forecast for several, he says counties, I think he meant countries, in Middle Europe, as a robbery by migrants goes awry, leading to a gang-style confrontation with police that is described as escalating to the point of shootouts. Again, another thing that you'd want to look out for in the future, and if this happens, matter of fact, if anything I say here happens, you can email me. You can go to realistnews.net and hit contact us and send me a message right through the site. You don't even have to be a member. And I will get that email, because a lot of times stuff will happen. I'll catch it and do a video. Hey, yeah, this happened. Webbot hit. A lot of times it goes right by me. I forgot that the report said it because I'm reading stuff every single day. My brain is like full. It's like all this stuff, short-term memory in and out, in and out. So if you catch something, man, let me know so I can give credit where credit's due. Hey, Webbot hit. Other major new sets for Europop include large areas for collapsing social contract as the economy and agreements to operate are shattered as the euro degrades to small fraction of its purchasing power. The data sets are bringing in bank failures and cross-border runs on banks. These last sets are filling with supporting values for major crowd problems as tens of thousands of people react to rumors of open banks/ATM. When I first read that, I said, well, doesn't he mean, banks closing? And I thought, no. This assumes the banks have already been closed or, banking holiday. And then rumors, hey, the banks are actually open. What? They go down there. People react to rumors. Oh, no, never mind. They're closed. Data continues to accrue for the Italian bank crisis to overwhelm the EU structures at several different levels such that the first cracks appear in the Union and Italy, followed by both Greece and Portugal, makes moves to separate from Brussels. Onto the China pop. The data sets are showing that this is something to look out. This is definitely something to look out for. Let me know if you catch this one. I mean, I'm sure I'd see it, but I might have to remember, oh yeah, the Webbot said to look for this in advance. And I don't always catch it. The data sets are showing that a devastating earthquake is going to be main news in China for a number of weeks over summer, Northern Hemisphere. The data is forecasting that bad engineering will be referenced as the proximate cause for the high number of fatalities, as several, he said, dozen, buildings are forecast to crumble on the heads of residents. This earthquake may be the one referenced in early Alta reports as being linked to CERN, Large Hadron Collider, and that leads to Chinese officialdom making formal protest. saying, stop using that freaking Hadron Collider because you're causing earthquakes on our part of the planet. That's what the previous report, or one of the previous reports, was talking about. The China pop sets are growing in support of a trade crisis that will be developing from the problems that are showing as emerging in the areas of bond sales. These data sets are indicating that some form of failure of the liquidity of the bond market. The data sets are further growing in support of the idea of panic talks that will be taking place between and amongst the financial elites of the planet as the Chinese trade machine is indicated to grind to a halt. The idea bubbling up from the data is that a trade deal will be, or has been, struck with a bond sale component. Apparently over the spring, Northern Hemisphere, the bond sale will be a failure, which will provoke an officialdom Chinese response, likely behind the scenes at that point. Then the data suggests that the response will get a series of results that will lead to an escalation of dueling interests, which in return goes to create open discussion. It is the open discussion phase of the bond sale problem that creates the real problems, as the data suggests that public discussion will bring up competing claims. These sets may be suggesting that the bonds involved in the sale are triple claimed. What does that mean? That means the same bonds were sold 3 times to 3 different parties. Who's the real owner? Gonna have to figure that one out. In other areas of the China pop entity, we have very large levels of growth for rapacious appetites and plum flower celebrations, dinners, all of which are supporting sets for gold. In these sets are new subsets for upwelling of motivating behavior by the government that will send the Chinese population out in search of gold. These sets have very extensive internal crosslinks over to the silver as money substitute for gold. Note that the silver sets within the China pop entity carry very high emotional values. There are a great many subsets deep and are hugely broad within China pop and show up via internal crosslinks in odd nooks and crannies of the structure. So it is not surprising for me to see that as the gold fever about to sweep China pop starts to wane due to dwindling gold on the shelf and very rapidly rising prices, in early to mid-May, the silver vibration is showing as returning to China pop. In these silver as money sets in China pop are huge numbers of internal crosslinks to all manner of capital controls, avoidance language, much of which is suggesting schemes exposed by the Chinese officialdom over 2016 as they crack down on population efforts to smuggle wealth out of China. There are also sets showing that some minor level party members, many who have annoyed some senior fellow, will be used as disposable tissues to vent popular anger at the crimes the elites allow themselves. On to the USA pop. Language about awakening is surfacing throughout the USA pop entity. Much of this is referencing the reality of controlled politics here in the USA, but a surprising amount of the new data goes to the idea of awakening as to the dying credit markets in the economy of the USA. The data is forecasting that the student debt awakening is going to hit this summer, Northern Hemisphere. The data is indicating that a digital problem develops in the governmental systems such that payments to whom are lost and withheld. As a result of the impact of student debt on the governmental systems, or the reverse, the credit system at the retail level within the USA pop is forecast to have the first spasm. This spasm is indicated to shake banks and close auto dealers, as well as cause seizures and firings at universities. Further, computer systems are indicated to be seized by agents of officialdom, which will cause no end of consternation and bowel cramping in many corner view offices. The real impact of the student debt impact on the credit system is going to be chaos, as credit cards are showing as shutting down in whole regions of the country. The data sets are suggesting that the impact will be both rolling from region to region over time, but also large enough to prompt high-level federal officialdom to spend all day lying to the public by the media. There is so much new language associated with gold and USA pop. There are new data sets at levels not seen since 2007. These new levels for gold and the USA pop are at multi-year highs and yet are exceeded by language in the same sets in which silver dominates. The whole of the precious metals linguistic structures in all entities are showing very large levels of growth. In fact, there are even new sets which are indicating that new generations, younger people below 30 years old, are now shifting their attention en masse to silver and gold as money. A case can be made linguistically that it has been the introduction of Bitcoin that has reshaped the younger mind's appreciation for alternatives to fiat currencies. There are some sets that would seem to be indicating that a political rally, perhaps even a convention, will spark off a dispute which then escalates into rioting several days later. These riots are also within aspect/attribute sets, which are in the direct supporting linguistic chain for both revolution and international horror. The riots themselves have many supporting sets that directly cross-link over to markets entity, where the terminating sets include derivative failures via insurance or reinsurance companies that then flow outward into sovereign bonds. The data sets are showing that the USA housing markets are going to go through one of the strangest periods ever. In these new sets, heavily cross-linked over to the markets entity and the powers that be entity, we have new sets showing that liquidity crisis is going to affect so many so abruptly that luxury properties will be abandoned and walked away from in numbers never before seen. The USA Pop is holding the view that the high-end real estate crisis in USA is a stepping stone into cultural shock and change as markets roll over. This is going to cause a situation of rippling effects as real estate active corporations lay off their employees. Further problems will come from the few remaining housing and commercial apartment construction jobs being shed when building ownership instantly becomes a liability for the titular corporation owners. Basically, the idea is that the companies that own rentals are not in the business for the monthly income, as that does not half cover real costs, and that when the opportunity as well as the future potential to sell is removed due to the spreading credit crisis, these corporations will first try to secure government funding, but with the political chaos, that quickly dies, and then they basically start shutting down and in the process abandoning both employees and properties. As may be expected, the developing chaos in the real estate markets, really the federally owned mortgage market, cause a no end of horrific problems for the local and state authorities. In some areas, the data suggests that taxes due to the sale or transfer of real estate are going to plummet more than half in just a few weeks' time. The data sets are highlighting many instances of heroic behavior being manifest through the chaos period, with some of the more notable examples coming this summer. In some instances, we have descriptors for homemade ambulances, which will be lifesavers in transporting wounded protesters and police through to medical services. There are repeated sets for doctors on the side of the street protests who will, without a thought, treat the police thugs who were just moments before beating them on their heads. Other sets show that crowds will cease struggles/fighting against police to allow for emergency first response vehicles to pass. In what looks to be a northern subsection of New York City, the rioters are described as rescuing the residents of a building which will be set on fire by police tear gas canisters and incendiary smoke grenades type of things, or flashbangs. The new processing has brought forward a number of the more powerful memes we have been following for over 10 years. Some of these memes have been shifted by a number of years, others by months or mere weeks. We need to note that the data is pulling more shorter-term sets forward for the memes of hyperinflation and markets in chaos. The sets for the chaos language in the new processing includes markets shut down, markets with restricted access, and markets abandoned/closed. In all cases, keeping in mind when I hear him say markets, he's referring to stock market, commodities market. Not like I went down to the side store market to go buy some food. Not quite that. In all cases, the data sets are referencing markets that are financial in paper or debt-based. In the instances of the restricted access language, there are subsets showing that only very elites will be allowed access to their funds. This is itself going to be a very contentious meme at some of the near elites of some of the hold on. This is itself going to be a very contentious meme as some of the near elites and higher level functionaries will also be among the excluded, and thus will discover they are, as with the rest of us, too common to be allowed in. Other detail sets around the restricted access to funds / currencies / digital accounts is indicating that the currency event will be a surprise to most of the population. It is associated with the word holiday and late spring, Northern Hemisphere. However, there are also a number of sets containing language for a bank shutdown that will be called a bank holiday. So, this then gets to a real gray area. Could the data sets be referring to the next USA officialdom holiday? Or is a sudden, surprising, and unexpected form of a holiday going to arrive with the out-of-nowhere announcement of a 3-day weekend? The data sets are showing that regions of the USA will have their bank branches shuttered in the chaos and that great financial upheaval. Not that, but in great financial upheaval. Other areas with local or regional banks still able to function will find that their ability to do out-of-the-area transactions is going to deteriorate very rapidly as the crisis deepens over 2016. In these areas of the data, there are many crosslinks over to the markets entity, and some of the terminating sets are within the Bitcoin subsets. The idea coming across from the USA Pop view is of a population that has suddenly plunged into struggle on a daily basis to achieve tasks / goals that used to be simple. Further, the data sets are showing that the national identity of the USA Pop is going to shift radically as the dollar empire has its first visible death throes this summer. The data sets are showing that crises in China will precipitate a depeg as well as a credit rating strip and a ratings crisis which then spread throughout the financial world. It is at this point, sometime past July 2016, that the gold in the vaults issue rises both in the USA and in China. During this period, the data is forecasting that all media will be reporting how bad and worse things have become in recent months. During the show me yours and I'll show you mine phase, the data shows that the numbers around gold and silver go truly ballistic. The data is forecasting that the rate of increase of the price of gold itself will be increasing at high single digits. Stated another way, the daily rate of growth will be escalating near 9%. This gold rise rate speed up will be a huge catalyst for lines in the street to buy gold and silver. The desperation level seems to be tied directly to the rising rate of gold value in dollars. The words in the media will include spectacular and parabolic and rocket to the moon and peak silver and peak gold and international currency instability and on and on and on. The data sets are suggesting that many new national scandals relating to money in some form will emerge over 2016 and briefly occupy the public attention span as the major crises unfold. Some of these scandals will include gold, not there, in which a national USA pension plan, which had thousands of clients who thought they had gold in their 401ks and other self-directed pension plans. These sets are suggesting that some of the officials at the national offices of the pension plan will live/survive to regret their participation in the fraud scheme, as clients are forecast to assault the offices, and in the resulting confrontation/fight/melee, several of the financial firm employees will not survive. Interesting. Brazil Pop. The idea coming out is that all manner of international sporting events, not only the Olympic Games, are going to be shut out of production facilities by local social action, which will emerge from a riot gone wild that will become a successful model for local popular actions. I've got to stop for a second because when I read that piece, instantly in my mind, the John Teeter time travel story. There will be no more official Olympics after the year 2008. I know that was his story, and we're way past 2008, 8 years past that. A lot of people have speculated he threw the times off on purpose. But just to pay attention to what he said would be coming down in this little timeline of events. A lot of what he said has actually happened, interestingly enough. So he mentioned there would be no official Olympics after whatever date, right? And now we're here, and this isn't the first time I mentioned Brazil, and it looks like there might be problems with their having the Olympics there. Now it's in the Webbot report. That's the first time I think that particular piece has been in the Webbot report. So that interests me. The data sets are forming support for a occupation zone, which will really be a no-go officialdom zone due to the many local committees forming new local governments in a de facto fashion. The idea is of a Brazil, from the view of officialdom, being cratered as various local communities begin realizing they are isolated and not likely to receive federal government assistance. The data further supports the sets that have language indicating that to speak is to secede, or public outcry over incompetence and corruption. Markets entity. The big one is showing up in the markets entity as the new data is accruing for the largest paper debt crash ever. The big one, crash language, is piling up new aspect/attribute sets for equity plunge and stocks plummet and debt defaults and carry forex trade failures and price fluctuations in bonds. The data is growing in the sets for a stock/equity market movement that is described as bringing tears and squeezing the bowels. The data is filling with language around the idea of a record pace downward and elevator stomach heaves. Other sets show that corporations will be scrambling to recover mere pennies as liquidity goes/fails. Other new sets for popular culture, words/phrases include a forecast for all-in and actual costs as the price suppression that has been occurring as a result of central planning accelerates its peeling back of the layers of rigging. The data sets are suggesting that markets of all kinds will be entering a chaos period that will dominate the summer broadcasts within the Western media. The data accretion patterns are arguing for a derivative hot potato to emerge in late May or early June that will set fire to banks. Some 30% of the new fire to banks language has both gold and silver within the new growth for these sets. These new silver and gold references are themselves descriptor sets for subsets within this lexical structure. The gold and silver subsets within this area are filling with money and interest rates as primary and secondary supporting aspects. The attribute sets within these aspects are focusing on competition between banks to acquire and store these forms of real money. Further, the data sets are also growing with interest rates as a major contributing subset for the derivatives hot potato, with a focus in these sets on a debacle that will begin with or in Turkey that will damage a key element that is a basis for a derivative chain. The real problem being highlighted is that a series of between bank sales and derivatives will be discovered to be a tightly bound chain that will have the holding link break just as the next leg of the currency competition begins its biting to the bone phase. The new data for this report brings in new sets for hyperinflation, that within their supporting sets they have new sets showing a forced revaluation of gold. Note, this may be just discussion at this stage and not action. There are some hints that this is a thing meme being driven by the powers that be. There are a number of large new crosslinks forming that terminate within the powers that be entity, where the terminating sets are filled with new language for new limits and new understanding of gold in monetary policy and no constraints/bounds on the currency devaluations. Other sets are directly going to ideology and fundamental belief, and others in similar vein that go to the religious nature of the monetary system, i.e., belief in ephemeral abstractions/mental images that will be rearing up in the discussions about gold specifically. Further, these sets contain subsets and other directly held values that go to central banks being in the position of discussing in public of a forced revaluation of gold. These sets are also getting supporting values from a small country which is in desperate straits within the financial system. Apparently, this small nation will be in possession of some serious gold reserves. Maybe a new large mine discovered, not sure. Additional note, data shows that the discovery has already occurred, but is being kept close to very few interested involved in controlling hands. But note that the discovery may not be a storage of gold, but may be rather a discovery of how to capitalize on a forced gold price revaluation. Recent processing in the sets above, additional note, 2 days more accumulation, adds new sets that may be hinting that Bangladesh may be the small nation who upsets global banking. These sets are suggesting that revenge is a contributing motivator. The data sets are forecasting that gold as money will be launched into global debate by the actions of the small nation. Much of the gold supporting sets are going to the idea of dollar degradation being a major propellant for the dollar price of gold. These sets are clearly showing that new all-time highs are coming for gold, and further that silver will get there first. These sets are showing that an initial pop of price action is going to be causing the oppressors of the precious metals to have loose bowels, as the media and public are showing as catching gold and silver fever. This is against a background of developing political fracturing and massive economic failure. These sets contain data for crashing housing markets, as well as deflationary debt destruction, and other sets in the same vein, going to the idea that once support from the Fed dies, so do all the debt-based or debt as asset bubbles. And further, the data shows that they do not merely deflate, but rather rupture and explode in a violent manner. Final paragraph. Once again, hauling model space back to the now, and then restarting it in slow forward progress, a large shock of the new as officialdom reaches its own cracking point, wherein the financial facade is set aside to deal with reality. These sets at this larger, more national/social/cultural level are forecasting that governments will be getting wise and reacting to developing reality in such areas as silver and gold. In the case of the latter, the officialdom is described as going to great lengths to disparage gold during the upcoming hyperinflation. However, during that same period, the same governments will be screaming to protect their national assets of silver hoards as silver across the globe shifts from industry monetary into strategic monetary industrial status. These sets are showing that surprising movements in the price will actually be so violent as to precipitate heart attacks. And the emotional sums in this area are but a small fraction of what is being carried by the longer-term values for the next 10 years. These sets are filled with language for too precious to use up and strategic embargo on shipping silver outside of borders, and many other sets going to the idea of those who have it wants to keep it at a national level relating to silver. If you want the report in full to read everything, quite a bit that I left out, www.halfpasthuman.com. He is Cliff High. He runs this thing. He collects the data with his spiders and servers and whatnot. I'm going to be interviewing him later on this month. I've taken a whole bunch of questions from my subscribers, and it's going to be the first time I've ever interviewed Cliff High. It should be very, very, very interesting. So if you want to support a great guy like Cliff High, go spend $15 on his reports. They are fantastic. Many times they essentially peer into the future somehow and grab stuff, sometimes pretty damn spectacularly. Other times, not. But it is what it is. I'd rather have something rather than nothing. I'd rather have it get some things right spectacularly many times rather than not know anything. But that's just me. So, hope you enjoyed my summary. And can't wait to see what happens. Starts happening later this year and next year. Take care.